Let's talk.
Giles Brown.
When in Rome, not just a saying that we come up with now and again, but it's a new look at Roman gods such as Pluto, Ceres, Jupiter, Mars, and Venus, as well as heroes such as Heracles, Hercules, Perseus, Jason, and Medea. Author Lynn Hamilton mines the original Roman sources to uncover what is most enduring in this canon of ancient stories. I am delighted to say that we are joined live today by the author of When in Rome, Lynn Hamilton. Good afternoon from us. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
So for those who may not be familiar with yourself, just explain why you are so qualified to write When in Rome.
Well, I don't know that I am, but Pen and Sword seemed to think that I had good enough qualifications. I did teach. I taught a course in Roman mythology. I just called it mythology for an art college back in the 1990s. And so I ended up reading all this material because I was designing the course for the college, which was relatively new as one of these startup for-profit institutions. And so I got to design a course and I really got into it. I really got into Ovid in particular. And I think that's my whole claim. I read everything in translation. I do have to say that the new translations by women translators are like the best. Shadi Barch's Aeneid. I've read that. I read that book every time I taught the class in mythology, but her translation it was like reading it for the first time. I just loved it so much.
I'm just thinking, so our male translators are a bit drier and they don't bring a certain je ne sais quoi to the translation because we, again, like everything else.
Or were they just trying to sound fancier than they needed to? I think a lot of times people who translate the classics, they feel like they have to capture the poetry. No, you don't, really, because the story is so good. Just capture the story. And I feel like that's what the new translators are doing. And I don't know if it's because they're women. I think that women do have kind of an ironic point of view on Roman mythology that male translators might lack. Seeing how invisible women are in Roman mythology has been really interesting. That's not universally true. They did have Medea.
Yeah.
But, and they also had Psyche, of course. And Psyche is a wonderful character who falls in love with the love of God, Cupid, and then chases him across half of Europe trying to get him back after she pisses him off.
But you've got to say, the Roman gods. And I know a lot of you can argue a lot of them are sort of stolen from the Greek or the Hellenic.
It's all stolen.
Yeah. Fair enough.
The Romans did not make any pretense about stealing all of their stories from other cultures. Why should they make anything up? No, their culture was already so rich in stories from Greece, from the Etruscans, from the Babylonians, from North Africa. They really didn't, I don't think they ever set out to create a religion or a mythology. What they did instead was to syncretize all of these similar mythologies into one coherent story. And that's what Ovid was doing with the Metamorphoses. He was trying to just get all of the mythology into that one book.
The thing is, though, if we are assuming that, and excuse my schoolboy mythology here, so Jupiter is Zeus, then presumably. Am I correct in thinking that Jupiter is the Roman equivalent of Zeus in Greek mythology?
He's called Jupiter.
Right.
In Roman. Yeah. In Rome, he's Jupiter.
Okay, because
in Greek he's Zeus.
Because the Greek. If you're looking at a female translator from what the Greek, main god Zeus does, it's shocking, disgusting. He would get absolutely banged up, and the key would be thrown away, as we say in these parts, because of the stuff that he gets up to with rape, abduction, etc., etc., etc. Lynn.
Oh, so true. So true. But can we say that there are no politicians that sort of just do whatever they wanted to?
Now, there's a thought. But getting away from, people turning themselves into swans, into raindrops, banish, wives turning people into branch. Let's not even go there. But there's a very good reason that the Romans have these myths. And it's not just about sort of worship. It's about sort of explaining sort of what happens with the seasons and why the sun comes up and et cetera, et cetera. Just explain a little bit about what it's about, Lynn.
Right. Well, yeah, I started with the idea that the ancient Romans did not have the kind of scientific explanations for everything that we have. And so the earliest storytellers, I believe we would all see that the earliest storytellers are going to be people who explain things to us in ways that make them less frightening. So, for instance, if you don't understand how the Earth turns on its axis and then it also revolves around the sun, you're not going to really understand day-night. Why does it turn dark? Why does it turn into winter when it was nice and warm 6 months ago? And I think that the earliest mythology initially was to explain that stuff to us. So, for instance, you have the myth of Proserpina and Pluto. Ceres is Proserpina's mother. She's the goddess of the harvest, and she is the goddess that ensures there's going to be food on the table. She's the one that teaches you or allows you to understand how to grow corn and wheat and whatever you can grow in your ground. And her daughter is Proserpina, and Proserpina enjoys the perpetual autumn of her mother's lifestyle. And she's out wandering with her friends one day gathering flowers, and the king of hell, Pluto, who's also a god, who's actually the sister of the brother of Ceres, sees his niece out here gathering flowers, falls madly in love. He must have her as his wife. Even speed dating would have given him more idea who she was, right?
Right.
But no, he must have her. And so he just packs her onto his chariot and takes her back down to the underworld where he lives. This is the world of the dead that he presides over. It's not really a terrible life, but now she is irrevocably separated from her mother, and her mother just goes crazy. And she grabs two trees out of the ground and lights their treetops on fire and just goes through the world brandishing these torches and looking for her daughter. And it's, and she's just letting the human realm starve to death. They're starving to death. It's perpetual winter. They can't grow anything because she's the goddess that allows us to grow stuff, to grow our food. And so finally, Jupiter, Zeus, who is also related to everybody in the story, has to intervene and say, okay, this is how we're going to fix it. You're going to have Proserpina with you, Ceres, you'll get her for half the year, and Pluto gets her for half the year. For half the year, she'll be the queen of the underworld, and for half the year, she will be your daughter here on Earth. Long story. Anyway, that explains why spring comes back, because Proserpina returns to Ceres. She returns to the surface of the Earth and brings spring with her when she comes.
And because this is sort of a deal that works for everyone. I mean, quite a scene as sort of Pluto rears up out of the underworld, complete with, I imagine, pretty good theme music, snatches her away, but as you said before, everybody seems to be quite okay. It's a case where everybody seems to be quite okay with the deal and kind of gets on with it. And so this is the way that the Roman children are taught the reason the seasons are how they are, presumably, Lynn.
Yeah, I think if we're talking about the morality, what children are getting from their parents, what the values that they're taught, I think that Stoicism actually plays a huge part here because it entered into Roman philosophy and mythology around the time that Rome was really successfully syncretizing all of those religions into one story.
Yeah.
And I think that what they wanted, the children, the values they wanted people to pick up or to accept things you can't change. Yeah. And there were so many things you couldn't change. But yeah, you were accepted to stoically accept the things that fate had brought you, and not to assign blame too quickly to anybody. But ultimately, it's always the gods' fault. It's always the will of the gods if something goes wrong. And that kind of prevents people from spending too much time whining, I guess, because it doesn't do any good. You are taught that your whining will do no good.
And of course, in Roman society, you have little shrines in your house, don't you, to the gods or your favorite gods? It's not just a question of you.
Gods.
Yeah, exactly.
And they were very important. Yes. So when Aeneas was leaving the burning remnants of Troy, it was very important to him to take his household gods with him. And he was carrying his father on his back because his father by that time was too disabled, and had his child in his hand and his wife in his other hand. And and even with this kind of package that he's trying to lead out of the burning flames of the city, he still had to take those household gods with him. But he couldn't carry them himself because his hands were unclean from his recent battle. So his father had to hold the household gods while they were escaping. Yep.
It's really interesting you mentioned Aeneas, because he is the reason that the Romans can justify the Punic Wars and why it's kicking off with Carthage. Team Dido here, definitely.
Yes.
Right?
Oh, me too.
Right.
Absolutely.
Explain to the listeners who aren't perhaps as much of a, because I've got a good thing going on with the Carthaginians, mainly because they wear long trousers. But explain to the listeners the whole setup between Dido and Aeneas, and how that justifies the reason that these two heavy superpowers of this 3rd century BC come to almost perpetual war.
Yeah. Well, okay. The Romans absolutely believed that it was okay for Dido to be sacrificed to Aeneas's mission, because Aeneas's mission was from the gods directly. I mean, they actually directly came down to earth and scolded him about staying too long with Dido. Yeah, but we're in the middle here. Okay, so Aeneas is leading the Trojan remnant who will eventually found Rome, and he's lost, and they're in ships. They are Troy in exile on the open seas, and they get blown off course, and they end up in Carthage with Dido, and Dido welcomes them with open arms. And Dido is amazing, isn't she?
Yeah, absolutely. That ox, cutting up the ox. Yeah, we could go on with that. Yeah.
She commands an army. She is building this giant temple to Juno. It's like a monument to architectural brilliance, right? And she's governing. She's a fair governor. Everybody loves her. Everybody in Carthage adores her. And she even had a really rough background. I mean, she's totally politician ready, I think, to lead.
Flees from Tyre, stops off the whole bit. I mean, just brilliant.
Yeah. She's just so amazing. Founded this town mostly by herself. She's a good leader. Obviously, she delegates. But, she's got this town. She's got this city. She's built this beautiful civilization. And Aeneas gets blown off course, and he and his people just kind of throw themselves at her in her temple for help, and she generously says, yes, you can. She gives them some land to settle down in. She lets them cut trees and make houses, and she's totally in control of her emotions at this point. It's really just Juno. It's Juno and Iris, and they gang up on her and make her fall in love with Aeneas, and they make her have sex with Aeneas.
There's a cave, there's a thunderstorm and a cave.
Yes, there's a cave and the storm. Yeah, that's all God-driven, though. She would never have looked at Aeneas with lust in her heart if she hadn't been goaded into it, because his destiny was more important than hers. So eventually, the gods tell Aeneas that he has to leave, and he does. And Dido can't get over it. She kills herself, and then Carthage is opened up to Iarbas and total destruction coming from the desert.
Yeah, and but in the meantime, obviously, it helps. It does explain the backstory for the Romans to say why Carthage is the biggie, the big enemy at that point for several hundred years. If I was to stand on my desk at the moment, A, you get a rather wonderful view of my ankles, but two, we can see Gibraltar from here, and those are the periods.
Oh, that's so cool!
Yeah, exactly. End of the world, basically. And of course,
awesome.
Pillars of Hercules, Heracles. We all want to talk. The region of Andalusia has, one of its emblems is Hercules with the pillars and the lion, etc. If you can explain a little bit about, how these heroes, as well as gods, but we have heroes as well. What's the connection then? What does Hercules do or Heracles do in the Roman canon, as it were?
Yeah, Heracles is a really complicated figure, but I think that people in the outlying colonies of the Roman Empire really fastened on him because he's the closest thing to the kind of destiny that you could have in Rome if you weren't born into a senator's family. He does have a divine origin, but he grows up entirely as a human being, has anger problems, terrible anger problems that manifest. When he's just a child, he kills his music teacher. His music teacher yells at him, hits him for hitting a bad note, and Hercules hits him back and kills him.
You see, he should have been a drummer.
And for that, his father sent him to...
They should have given him a drum set. He would have been fine. But anyway,
well, who knows? Yeah, that might have made him even more violent. I don't know. That's a good question. But yeah, he was both blessed and also cursed by the gods, and I think that represented how people probably felt that they related to the gods, that there were blessings but also curses, and that you had to contain all of these things in one being, and Hercules contained them and still rose to greatness and left a legacy. What people wanted was a life, but people still want. They want a life of purpose. They want some kind of immortality, some kind of legacy. They want to be remembered. We all want to be remembered forever, but if we're lucky, we get remembered for a few years after we die, right? And Hercules is pretty much the only one who gets remembered forever. But yeah, he did manage to exert some control over his bad temper. But his temper also worked for him. That violent nature gave him a lot of energy, and that he was able to use to conquer all the world's monsters and the 12 labors. So,
with a couple of things here, with all the monsters, are we supposed to think that these are basically similes, facsimiles, if you will, for for human emotions or things that we should be looking out for? Is there, again, are we reading too much into these, or are these supposed to be examples, or literally do people think, well, you better look out because I wouldn't go too close to that rock because there's a singing woman over there and you'll be in big trouble.
Yeah, the Roman poets really liked to emphasize your decision making, and sometimes this had to be done very, very quickly. But if we're going to go back to Hercules, the story that I really like for some reason is in the middle of his labors, he was asked to capture and tame the wild horses belonging to Diomed. Well, Diomed is a savage, and the reason nobody has tamed his horses up to now is that anybody who visits him ends up being horse food. Okay. He feeds people to his carnivorous horses who are murderous and blood eating. They want to crush your skeleton. He has these murderous horses that nobody rides, nobody can harness them, and so Hercules goes in and pretends to be the perfect guest. He knows that Diomed is going to try to kill him and feed him to the horses. He already knows this, but he plays the perfect guest. He asks to see the horses, and then he escapes with the groom. because the groom forms this really fast connection with Hercules. Like, okay, I'm taking you to the stables, but I need you to know that I'm a slave here. I was captured. Our ship was captured. I know you. I know somebody who knows you. Get me out of here, is what this guy is saying. So all the way to the horses, this groom is saying, we've got to get out of here. He's already lost all but 2 of his fingers to the crazy horses. Yeah, they're all female, by the way. And and so they managed to harness these horses between the 2 of them, and they're taking off. And then they have to stop and rest the horses, and Diomed is catching up to them. And so Hercules leaves the horses with Abderus, the groom, and he goes to get Diomed, and he is fully decided in his brain that he is not going to kill Diomed. He's going to take Diomed alive no matter what, because Diomed, he knows, is the son of Mars. And you can't kill the son of Mars, even no matter how vicious he is, you still have to respect the gods, right? So he captures Diomed, takes him back to the horses, but that's when he sees that the groom he lost control of the horses, and now the groom is dead.
Right.
And that's when he loses it. He loses control of his temper, and he throws Diomed at the horses and lets them devour him. Love that story. The horses are immediately tamed from eating their own master.
Well, there you go. You see,
does that answer your question at all? I can't tell.
I don't know. I don't actually care. It's
so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the story so much because, I mean, here's a man who struggles all his life with his temper. You know, that's actually his main battle, is with his temper. And the gods can even use that. Juno uses that against him one time to get him to kill all his own children, and he kills his wife because he's driven mad in the situation. But everybody knows that he can be driven mad because he has such a bad temper and he's not always in control of it. And you know, he's trying to do the right thing, but other people don't do the right thing, you know, and it makes him angry. So what do you do?
Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of eating of people. I mean, Saturn eats his own sons, and that's like one of the most famous paintings in Spain with Goya, of course. You know, Saturn devouring his sons.
I do love that picture. Yeah,
yeah. It's a bit of a closer on a first date. I always find if people say what you're looking at. You know,
if people understand your love of Gaudi, they will understand anything you need them to understand.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how much fun was this to put together, Lynn? And how do you stop making it into something that is as long as the Odyssey, basically? So how do you manage to boil all these down to a manageable size for those who aren't as knee deep in the mythology as you are, and to a certain extent I am. So how did you manage to sort of pick out the best bits, and how much fun was it to write, Lynn?
It was really fun, but Pen and Sword always gives me deadlines, and that's what keeps my books relatively short. Yeah, I'm trying to write a book a year here. I don't always succeed, but yeah. I get about a year to do these things, and you know, I want them to be published around the same time as the sources, as the translations that I was using, not 50 years later, and all the other translations have come out. You know? But yeah, you know, I decided to try to put the Trojan War at the center of the book, and then look, kind of reverse engineer the book from there and say, how did we get here? And then what happened afterwards, because the Trojan War really is, if not the central element in Roman mythology, it's definitely one of maybe 3 or 4 different main stories that pulls all these different characters together. And so I sort of, worked backward from the Trojan War. What do we need to understand the Trojan War? We need to understand who the gods are and why they were invested in this. And we need to understand who the main characters were in the human world leading up to the Trojan War. So that's kind of how I kept it concise.
The book is called. What are you hoping that people are going to take from your book when in Rome? What do you hope that they will leave with, Lynn?
Well, I hope that people come to this book because they're genuinely curious, and they've all also been very badly confused by the Marvel universe and the DC comic universe and the movie franchises. I can't help what they're doing. That's one of those things that I just have to be stoic about. I can't stop them from making those movies. Obviously, it's a huge industry. But I thought for people who actually want to go back to the original literature and understand what the original literature was teaching us about these things, that they can go to this book and read it in 2 or 3 afternoons, and get a holistic picture without being overly bombarded by minor gods and goddesses who can really kind of
those pesky demigods.
If you write too much, then nobody can remember anything out of your book, right?
Yeah,
that's what I'm thinking.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The book is called When in Rome. It's by the brilliant Lynn Hamilton. Lynn, listeners, you can order it from our own virtual bookstore, by the way. Lynn, I know you've got websites. You've got websites, but are they mainly to the animal stuff you do, the animal rights stuff, or do you?
I do have an animal rights blog, animalrightschannel.com. I do. Yeah, please check it out.
You will do indeed. And for those of you who heard a crashing halfway through the interview, I'm pretty sure that was a feline making a bid for freedom in the background. I heard a crash. Was that the cat, Lynn? I saw a cat appeared in the Zoom, and then I heard a crash. I'm thinking.
Yeah. He brought something down with him, a boot or a teapot or something. I don't know.
The joys of cat. Listen, the book is called When in Rome. It's by the brilliant Lynn Hamilton. Lynn, thank you so much for your time today.
Well, thank you, Giles. This has been wonderful.
Yeah, it was great fun to speak to the great Lynn Hamilton. The book is called When in Rome, and you can order it via our own virtual books. In fact, you can order most of the books of the authors who we interview here on TRE. Go to the virtual bookstore, click on the front cover of the book, and it will be winging its way to you in collaboration with a well-known delivery service, probably named after a South American river. That's right, Orinoco Deliveries. That's what I say.